Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm going to take bittersweet chocolate and I'm going to dry brush next to the nose, I was going to say, next to the edge of the ear.
Are
So
ears red?
So we dry brush all the way along inside there. Leaving it like so. All right, that's your mission. I'm going to take black brown. I'm using my 3/8. Now it depends again on the size of yours. And I'm just going to come along and I'm going to shade just loosely inside the ear with black brown. Now black brown is our mix that we make. Listed in our notes. So we're just going to strengthen up around there. Once we're done, you're going to see that we're going to be doing some strengthening around the edge in a few places, but we're going to be adding the light, soft, fuzzy fur that kind of overlaps inside the ear. So right now we're going to shade that with our black brown. I'm going to use my 3/8 lunar blender. And we're going to dry brush khaki tan along the outer edge of the ear. And you're just going to kind of work it in a little bit. So it's not perfectly straight. Do you see how it's going to give the illusion that the ear kind of bends a little bit? So we'll come along there. And that's with khaki tan. A little stronger down the back side. So that's not too bad. And you can do a little bit on this edge of this ear here, the raw umber part to the ear. You can just dry brush a little on there as well. We're going to double load our little filbert stencil brush. And I pat it on the palette. Of course it's dry. I'm going to take, I've got khaki tan and milk chocolate. So I put the milk chocolate up towards the milk chocolate section. And I'm just going to pat that in there. And I'll just work my way down so it's very soft and faint. I'll put a bit more milk chocolate there so I don't see the bridge line between the two.
This isn't dry brushing like we did the
It's like I should pat it off as we go, but no, it's not just a side load and dry brushing. And I'm going to come all the, whoops, flip the brush the wrong way, all the way along here and blend my way down a bit. Just to fade that off so that your color in there just fades these two together. Then I'm going to wash and dry my brush. See how quick that was? And this is the filbert stencil. So I'm going to now go into some burnt umber. Now, this can be dry brushed along there or double loaded. And I'm just going double loaded right now because we're just coming from double loading on this one. So I'm just double loading and coming along here. I'll pick up a bit more burnt umber, scuff a bit off on the towel, and I'm going to come along in behind here. So I'm just working my way along here, and I'm just going to come along and blend, just scratch a little bit of this burnt umber part. You see the burnt umber on the brush. I'm just going to bring a little of that. So it's going to go from burnt umber just by the ear. We start at the ear with the brown, come along here. We are going to be doing some shading and things after too, or dry brushing, which it's going to be a kind of whichever you choose. So we bring that along like so. So it is blending those colors together. And then as it dries out, if I'm seeing a line, which I am here, I'll go back over it again because I don't want to see where it's base coated and it stops with that color. All right, so I'm just going to blend that in a bit. I will give it a dry because I don't want, if you go over dry brushing that's still wet, you'll pull it off and make a hole. So I'll repeat that again so that I don't have that base coat line that I can see there. We're going to dry brush in the middle of his head with burnt sienna. So don't go out to the outer edges. You're keeping it more centered there. It's not overly visible, but it is. And things show up more when you add your varnish. So I'll scuff my brush off. And now I'm going into red spice. I'm going to give it a really quick little dry, because if you dry brush on top of moist paint, and even though we say dry brush, we think it's dry, it's not necessarily dry. So it kind of digs a hole sometimes. So we want to make sure that it's dry enough, and make sure that I always give my brush a grind when I'm on there to make sure I'm getting that excess wet out of the middle. Now I'm coming in the center of where I did this, so it's not, again, all the way covering all of my burnt sienna. I'm just doing a little red spice in the center. So this is rounding the top of his head. We are coming with little lines afterwards, which is going to make a difference as well. Wet our little 1/8 grainer or rake and filbert, and I'm going to pick up my paint, and I'm going to what I call scrunch. So I take my brush and it splays open the bristles. Am I under the camera? There we go. Scrunch, and it splays open the bristles. So I have the paint, it's thinned with water, scrunch, and then I'm going to come up and add little, and they got to overlap each other. We want them to be little. I'm even pulling a little longer than I want. Just short little strokes. If it's scrunching, if it's getting flat, work them in again. So it's nice and fine, and we can just fade these down into the bottom of his muzzle there. Just bring these up. We want to still see our other colors through, and when you're done this, you can come and put a few on the back as well. So they don't need to be much, just a couple, and you'll see them through afterwards when we put his spots on. You'll just see a little, and this kind of just adds a highlight. If you want, you can go around the back haunch and add a bit more if you want. It depends what you're seeing of your rock. I do want these to come up, and they just kind of fade off here. So scrunch, pick them up, just some little ones. And you can come in here after with your liner if you want to define a few. If you get a bit overboard, you can come back with some milk chocolate, and even pick up a bit of milk chocolate and burnt umber and come back through them and tone them down a bit. We end up wanting this to be brighter over here along the edge of his head, so I can just turn my brush on the side and just drag a little along there. So that just kind of strengthens that edge highlight up a bit along there. So we have just these guys just fade off into here, okay? And if they feel like they die down too much, you can come back in the middle, maybe pick up a little more khaki tan so that it's a little bit brighter, same tones, and just come with a few in the middle. I wouldn't go everywhere, but if you need to pop up the brightness, you can put a few more in the middle with that. Okay, so we're going to add these in there, and it's going to depend on your rock. This rock has a lot of dents there, so they make it a little difficult to get fine lines. So that's where I'm going to come back. I'll show you actually. I'll come back with some milk chocolate in there. I'll pick up a bit of milk chocolate, a bit of burnt umber, and it has to be watery, thinned down, but it can't be to the point where there's no color of paint. So I'll just come in here and I'll pull a few, blot it a bit, just a few lines that where I got it really solid, trying to work around those bumps. Okay, and again, like we say, every rock is going to be different. Alrighty, over here. Okay, so I'm going to side load raw umber on a 1/4 inch flat, and I'm just going to shade. And now some people, when we had this base coated, when we did it originally, and it may have kind of disappeared on you. I'm just going to go back here a bit more. Just kind of float it a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to take, and I've mixed a little bit of khaki tan into almondine. So it's more almondine, it's a bit of khaki tan into it. And I'm going to dry brush. So along the bottom of his chin, we'll call it. So we want to have it brighter. This is a mix of almondine with a bit of khaki tan in it. And I'll just bring it up a little bit there. And we want to come all the way along. It's sort of the side and bottom, if we'll call it that, of his chin. Scuff it off a bit. And I'll just kind of, you're just kind of dry scuffing it up a little bit. You just want it to fade off into this. We never want to see a straight, bold line of anything ending. So we just come along with that. And that's just going to give a little bit of roundness. And then I want to come up in here and just strengthen up above the eyebrow. Okay, so just a little bit there as well. All right. We're going to dry brush Bittersweet Chocolate along the top of the muzzle, just upwards, and I'm going to come a little bit along the side. So this Bittersweet, and you see I'm going to come right over under his eye. This is our first layer. Okay, so we're just setting in a little darker. If we came with the pure dark right away, it would look too strong. So we just are going to fade this away. We're wanting to leave that light that we dry brushed along there. So I'm just bringing this in. This is the Bittersweet Chocolate. And then we're going to, you can put it a little under his ear if you want. It depends on how much of the underbody's showing. Every rock is different. You may not see any of that. Like this rock that I have doesn't show it a lot. So I'm just going to take that and we're going to dry brush along there with this. We're going to let this dry and we're going to come back in with black brown. We're going to take black brown mix and we're going to shade along the ear on the
left side.
Left. Then I'm going to shade in this section here, so it's next to the raw umber. Next to that raw umber edge that we had on our ear before. Of course, now we dry brushed Bittersweet along there, and now I'm shading with that color, which was a step ago, but we moved it to here. I'm also going to shade along the outer edge on this ear, and I'm going to kind of bring it around and kind of shape that ear out a bit. I'll continue up this side of the ear to the tip, and then again it's going to come all the way along, so I'll just come from this way. All the way along the outer edge of the ear. So we did the outer edge of this ear, and I'm just going to give it a bit more of a tip up there, and that's it. We shade behind this ear afterwards. So right now I'm on the ear, okay? So that makes a difference. We're on the ear. I'm just going to bring it in right there too. Okay, so that's the black-brown mix that we're shading with. So what I've done here is I've taken and I've used my 3/8 lunar, it's easier to get in here with that, and shaded with black-brown, just a dry brush along the bottom of the chin. We want to keep it nice and soft. Now we're going to take black-brown, and I'm going to use my 1/4 inch dome stippler, and I'm going to dry brush coming from the nose, and this comes up into his face, and by the eye, we bring it up there by the eye. Now remember, we did black-brown or bittersweet here already, but that was to add the first layer because the black-brown would be very strong. So I'm going to come down beside his snout as well, his nose, along the snout, and just kind of strengthen a little bit under the eye there. And then to get the look, like I said, I don't think this black-brown is as dark as I'm just going to strengthen them up a bit more. I'm going to take and I'm going to stipple just gently. I don't want to fill it in. I'm not trying to make fur like a teddy bear. I just want to stipple a little bit away from there just to get the look, you know, to achieve that kind of velvet look, that the snout, that would be the term I'm thinking of. And I'm going to just come up and dry brush a little bit around his ear as well, just kind of dirty up some of these places. We're going to shade behind there, but do you see how that just kind of helps with the look of the fur? So we're coming in there and doing a little bit of that. I can just kind of tap a little if I want there. I'm going to smudge that because I tapped a little bit too much. Sometimes it's right inside your brush, and if you press now trying to get some out, you kind of overdo it. I don't want to see where the nose ends. That's what I'm trying to get rid of. So I don't want to see how I can kind of black-brown right onto the nose there. So it just kind of fades up there. I'm just creating this nice, soft-looking snout. That's not too bad. I'm okay with that. And I'm going to just dry brush a little there so I just get it a little bit flatter. So that's not too bad. I think I'm good with that. I'll leave that like that. So that's where I'd like you to go right now. So we're going to take neutral gray on my lunar blender. I scuff it off a bit. I want to give this bridge or whatever to the top of the nose, and you can kind of just scuff it up a bit. We're just scratching this in here. So we've got the top to his nose. It squares the nose off nicely. Then I'm going to come down the middle between the two nostrils. I'll scuff it off again, get a bit more paint. And we're just going to kind of give it like a curve here. It's like a highlight under that other nostril. Now this one's ending up having two dents in there as well. So we've got this neutral gray, and I scuff it along the bottom, coming down on a curve. That's it. I don't do anything over on that side. And then I'm going to take my 0 round, and I'm going to take some khaki tan on it. And I'm just going to scuff it on my toweling as well, because I don't want it to be solid. And I just want to bring a line across there. And I will, again, have to scuff it again. I've got quite a few bumps to kind of work in around there. So I'll just come in there as well. Yeah, so we're just highlighting that. Basically, I might have it a little stronger, I think, on the top here. It just depends on the bumps. And I've got quite a few bumps that I'm dragging it around there. I'm not intending on covering all of that neutral gray. We want to see that neutral gray still. Okay, so we're putting these marks on our nose. I'm going to start with his eye. I'm going to actually start with the shading. So we're going to shade. I want you to see that the eyeball is in a little bit. So we're leaving a little bit of black around the top. So I'm going to shade, float a highlight of neutral gray, and then blot with my finger. So it doesn't leave a lot of it there. It leaves a blur. And then I'm going to do the same thing with burnt umber along the bottom. We're leaving some black edge around. Burnt umber along the bottom, and I blur with my finger. I want to see a little more burnt umber than I do the neutral gray. So we do this with our eyes all the time. And I'm going to take milk chocolate, and we're going to put a ring of milk chocolate. We'll call it that. It can be a broken ring, it doesn't matter. Along the outer part of the eye and in the tear duct. So we put it in that tear duct as well. And if you feel that it's too bold, you can touch it with your finger as well.
Just on the bottom or on the top too?
Just on the bottom. And I'm going to bring it so it's along the back of the eye, a little fatter. There. I've got a dent there, but that's good. So, and then we're going to put a little tiny highlight line of warm white, which I didn't get out. And it's a little comma and a dot with my liner. So I will put his little dot here. And if you feel like you didn't leave enough of a line around the back, that's when we're going to bring the little. That's a little wide, but he's a little bigger actually, so that's not too bad. But if you feel that you need to kind of come around and reshape the round to your tear duct, you can do that with your liner. Fine line along the outside edge, and you can bring the little tiny shape. It's not to be too big at the back, just a little tiny. And I'm going to thin. Whoops. I'm going to thin burnt umber and add a tiny fine line. You can see it in your photo.
Thank you.
Just a nice little tiny line along there, okay? So we're going to be taking our 1/8 lunar blender, and I'm going to dry brush in several spots. One right above that little line. And if you haven't got your line on yet, it doesn't matter. You put your line underneath. You're just leaving a little space above the eye. So we're putting that there. I'm going to dry brush a little bit. I want it a little bolder there. And this is around the tear duct. And then we're going to I think we're losing Betty over there. So we have this shape around the eye. Then we're going to come along inside the ear. And nice and soft, I'm going to come out a little bit over that shading and dry brushing that we've had before. We're doing a nice soft dry brush here. This is fuzzy. It's going to give us the look that it's a little bit soft and fuzzy. Now I'll get a little heavier on the brush again. So it's a little bolder there. And it's under this little bit here. We're going to add little tiny fine hair with warm white coming from this soft fuzzy fur. And I'm going to come up and dry brush some soft fur. This is just really nice soft baby fluff coming out of their ear. So we want it to be a little wider at the base coming out. Okay, so that's the dry brushing we're doing there. And I may as well show you with the liner, the almondine line. So I'm just going to take, and it doesn't matter if it's a bit of a broken line, it's just a trim highlight along the edge of the ear. And I'm going to come right up and do a little at the top of that ear. You don't come down the back of the ear. And the same thing on this ear. It has a trim along the edge, and it just fades up and disappears there. Comes around the top a little bit on that. And I'm going to put a little on here. There. That's what you're doing with the almondine. We're going to thin warm white, and we're going to, using our liner, and I've got my round, so that'll make a difference. Okay, using my liner with thinned warm white, we're going to add some little fine hair in these dry brushings that we did. So you see how, and not everywhere. So it's not in all of them, but we do have it in this one above the eye, and you can put a little down here if you want beside the eye. But where these are basically is up in the ear. Oops, I'll slide this guy over a little bit, that'll help. So we're going to have a few of these little furry lines coming there, and a little of that soft fuzzy fur coming from there. And we'll pull them in along the ear. I'll have to thin that again. So we want just a few little fine hair overlapping here. Just giving us the look that it's nice and soft and fuzzy. And where the majority of it is seen over here. It comes out and overlaps onto all of our tiny little soft furry fuzz that we put there. These ones really overlap it. There's lots. From the view that this is, we have lots of little tiny fine lines. So again, depending on your rock, you may have to thin quite often. And they can cross over each other as well. And then as it works up here, it gets less. We're not seeing as much. Okay, so that's the plan, Stan. We're going to shade with bittersweet. You can add a little drop of water into it just to thin it down a bit. Or you can also keep your brush wetter. So I'm going to shade along our burnt umber lines that we have for his back that we dry brushed. So I'll shade along those, and I'm going to just smudge with my finger to we don't want to have bold lines. We're just strengthening it up. And again, it depends on the bumpies in your rock. So I shade along there, and I'm going to smudge. The same thing in the front. So I'll shade all these lines. I'll just do a little more there. You're following along where your shading was. And I'm just going to take my finger and smudge because we just want to darken that. You know how we did it originally? Now it's back to back. Oops. I'll shade along beside that as well and smudge my way down. So I'll do that on all of those lines. We did this with our shading originally, or dry brushing, pardon me. And now I'm going to strengthen behind that thigh and smudge it out. We're not looking for a crisp shading line. And I'll do the same thing on the front part of the thigh. So it's like a back to back there as well. So it just smudges it out. As it dries, you'll see I haven't done the back to back on this one and it's really showing there. So we'll do all of that. Now what we've done, I'm going to just hit this with the dryer for a second because I've got to come along this section by the ear. I've mixed a little bit of, I have my black-brown mix. I've put a little bittersweet into it. And I'm going to shade. So we're going to shade, I'm going to start right here for now. Just come in and shade. Whoops, I guess it would help if it was in the camera view. Thank you. So we would shade along side his head, right along his face, and just fade off to the bottom. We want to have it fairly strong here. So I'm going to walk it out. And I may go back and repeat that. But this is going to pop up his face nicely. Lift it right up off of his body a bit. So it's going to shape it. I'm going to come up here nice and softly, but it's behind the ear. When we come along here, this is what's going to show your ear is now going to lift off. Walk that out. But you see how the ear now lifts, that back of the ear where we dry brushed it. It lifts it up nicely. And again, everybody's dimples in their rock, I just fade it off. I'm not really coming along under there. You just want to fade it off. So if I get a little, it's fine, but I'm not intending on having any strength there. I'll let this dry, and I will come back in a second time and strengthen that up. Anywhere you think after that you might need a bit more, we do want to put the bittersweet, the thinned bittersweet shading. I'm going to put a bit, I don't know if I mentioned that, but I'm going to come and put a little bit just along the top of his head there. That's going to round the back of his head. We're not looking to darken too much because we have that light coming up there and we want that there. I look at his face and he could use a little bit of bittersweet dry brushing. So I'm going to come through here and just a little bit. I'm just dry brushing and lifting it just to put it in a few little places. See how that just adds a bit more dimension to his face? It's just a bit. I'm just kind of dry brushing in a few spots opposed to covering a whole area. You know, you can come along the side of his face if you want to just add a bit more. If you have a space that looks like too flat, like if there's nothing there, you can do a bit there. Like, you know, I can add a little. Every guy is going to be different. I'm going to just let, where did I put my shading brush? There it is. I'm going to take a little of that black-brown shading. Just a bit, and I'm going to come along beside his ear and just kind of smudge that out a bit too. everyone's different. I might put a bit here too and smudge it out. It just depends on how dark or where the bumps are on your rock. That's not too bad. So I think he doesn't look too bad. So we've got, what I have to show here is I'm going to take my 1/8 lunar blender and I'm going to pick up a little bit of almondine and warm white. Warm white is the majority, but the almondine's just going to tone it down a bit. And I just scrunch the brush a bit. I want to keep these jagged. If you have spots transferred on, fine. They don't have to be. So I'm again picking up, but the majority is warm white. And I'm coming in, and you want them to be uneven and jagged. And they're following the shape, right? If his haunch is curved, then they're going to come in curved. And of course, the bigger the rock, you can make them a little bit fatter. And you can concentrate in the middle afterwards. You can come back and strengthen up the middle of some with just a bit more of the warm white. I still have a couple to do down here. So, and then we've got what we called, we talked about them being almost like racing stripes. So these come down those curves on his back. There's of course some in here. But you have these stripes that come down his back. They do not have to be perfectly even either. You know,
Let's say right on the stripe.
yeah, you're following that stripe. And he's got two. Another one comes along here. So you're just going to come down and add these stripes. And then when you're bringing this one on here, then there's, of course, more fading out because that's coming down to that other haunch and his back. He looks so cute. So once you're done with your stripes or your dots, if you want, you can come back and dry brush a little bit over the ones that are right next to the ear or next to the, so that it looks like they're down underneath.
Dry brush with what?
The black-brown mix that you shaded with. So you're gonna do these, and if you want after, it just depends on how jagged they look. You can take your liner and you can come back after if you feel like it and add a few just fine lines with your liner. If you want to make them
Hairy.
hair, yeah. So they are hair, of course, so they're just white spots on the hair. So if you want to kind of really add more detail, you just come back in with that afterwards. That's all there is to the spots. All right?
So
Each guy's different.